technology and the different paths to stability, the greater community that you will experience has many restraints. It also has many opportunities. It requires that nations become united within themselves if they are to engage with other worlds and with the difficulties and complexities of contact. This is a great advantage as long as it is carried out in a way that is truly beneficial for the peoples of that particular world. This requires unity, a unity that is not born of one philosophy or religion but of shared necessity. Nations within your world now must work together for the security of the world. Here again, stability and security become the overriding emphasis. Ancient animosities and hatred between nations and tribes must all be moderated so as not to break out into war or destroy the world's resources. Here you become like the greater community you will face. You will have to suppress certain tendencies within your nature and within your world in order to achieve stability and security. And you will have to develop a boundary between your world and the greater community in order to exercise your own rules of engagement and to determine what ethics you will follow regarding who you will be in contact with and how you will engage with them. In the greater community, in the region in which your world exists, nations usually engage with each other in space, in councils, and rarely on their home planets. Because secrecy and discretion are important, actual visitation to other worlds is rare unless worlds are in a network together and have developed over time a great trust with one another. In this case, many different races, if they can tolerate a similar environment and environmental requirements, can live on several different planets. But actually multiracial environments are fairly rare because of the biological hazards involved. Unless races have evolved to function together and have developed the necessary technology and medical boundaries to prevent contamination, then you rarely find many different races living in one world. Yet if races live constantly in sterile environments, cohabitation is possible and is practiced. You can begin to see the limitations here. It is rare that you will find areas on the terrestrial surface of planets where many different racial groups function and travel, come and go and so forth. Trade is conducted generally off-planet through large trade stations and networks in space. Many nations will have trading stations near their planet, or planets, in order to control exposure and to ward off unwanted inquiry and intrusion. Here you can begin to see the great problem of keeping the greater community out of your sphere of influence. If you allow it into your sphere of influence, then you will face tremendous difficulties, and stability and security will be more difficult to sustain and, in some cases, impossible to maintain. Societies evolve and build within these restraints if they are to survive and pass through the many thresholds of development, both within their worlds and in contact with other worlds. Eventually, they will generally establish these kinds of parameters. If their worlds have reached a peak in what they can sustain for their own populations, then stability and security become the emphasis. Outside interference is recognized as hazardous. Trade, if it is engaged in, is dealt with in a very specific manner. Societies evolve around these restraints. While it is necessary for a world to become united within itself to function successfully in the greater community, the nature of that unity can take a broad range of expressions. To be a free race, to be a race that has individual rights and freedoms within its own world and sphere of influence, requires a great deal of development and restraint. As worlds become overpopulated, as resources become depleted, the restraint on personal freedom increases. This is what you will be facing now in the decades to come: the loss of wealth, the loss of mobility, the loss of physical space, the loss of opportunity, and ever greater restraints imposed upon you by your own governments. This is what happens when you reach a point where you are overwhelming your world's resources, where you have run out of room and where you are at risk of undermining your world's ability to sustain you in the future. That is why humanity at this moment is creating the very conditions that will limit or even destroy individual freedom here. This is a very great problem. It is a great problem that will be determined by how you, as part of the human family, as part of a nation, and even on the individual level, will deal with the great waves of change that are coming to your world. The great waves of change are largely the product of the overuse and misuse of your world's resources, the pollution of your world, and the great instability that is being created in the world's biological, ecological and atmospheric systems. There are worlds that emerge into the greater community where personal freedom has never been known or practiced. But, generally, worlds such as your own that are biologically rich and where the native peoples evolved in isolation from one another go through a very prolonged and difficult process of establishing contact and unity. This is rarely done in a harmonious manner, as competition and conflict overwhelm people within a world where certain groups become dominant and where wealth is not shared or distributed equally. The pathway, therefore, that humanity has followed in its prolonged and very difficult and unhappy history is actually a pathway that is followed by many other emerging worlds where intelligent life has been able to evolve and to sustain itself. Do not think, then, that humanity is a bad race and that humanity is more evil or sinful than other races. Actually, you have followed a very normal path of development in the greater community thus far. But the limits of time and the requirements of your environmental situation in your own world now require a great change in emphasis, a great change in understanding, a movement away from growth and expansion to security and stability, to sustainability, to more of a steady state, to a greater equality and equalization between nations and peoples. Here you will have to control your population size. You will have to control the distribution of wealth. You will have to provide for the poor. And the wealthy will have to moderate their behavior, their appetites, their greed and their consumption to achieve stability and security. Technology will have to advance, but even more than this, you will have to change the way that you live. Those who now consume too much will have to consume less. And those who have too little will have to have a sufficient livelihood. Over time, the human population will have to become smaller, hopefully through very humane means and through restraint, for there will no longer be any room for an ever-growing human population. You will have to live within greater restraints. Other worlds have had to follow similar paths. However, in many cases, worlds were overtaken before they ever became united. Foreign influence became established. Inroads were made into the leadership of emerging worlds, their conflicts were exacerbated until one chosen nation or group was supported to overcome all the rest. This has not yet happened in your world, and it is to your benefit that this is so. Some worlds are so valuable to others that they were overtaken before the native peoples ever gained any technology. This has happened countless times in the greater community. In the stable environment that exists in your region of space, your world is amongst a very few that have not been overtaken or consumed by other nations. The biological diversity of your world has played a part in this. The value of your world has restrained other nations from entering into direct competition with one another. But now, amongst those races who seek to gain dominance here, there is a competition for influence, a kind of subtle attempt at conquest to make humanity weak and dependent, to encourage human conflict secretly so that humanity never gains security or stability, thus requiring it to reach out to foreign powers and to accept whatever inducements these foreign powers might offer you. Your few allies in this region of space speak out against this, as they have done in the briefings the allies of humanity have sent into the world. But intervention and influence are part of the problem and the challenge of emerging into a greater community of intelligent life. Yet this is far different from most people's expectations and assumptions. Generally speaking, if nations become technologically advanced, they become entirely secular in nature and will rarely have active, vital religious traditions. This is because the emphasis on technology and resources becomes so predominating and such a source of wealth and control that it overwhelms whatever other notions of power and authority that the native peoples might have had. As a result, over time, the reality and the existence of religion as you know it becomes very rare and is only practiced by small groups, often under clandestine conditions. Therefore, you should never assume that technological advancement promotes ethical or spiritual advancement, for in most cases it is the opposite that actually transpires.